proud of you. So you mean to tell me you're going to hold that against me because I love you and I want this moment to be special?
A woman in her late 30s, successful in her career, had managed to raise her kids alone after her husband left her. She seemed to have it all. Everything except love. Lonely and hoping for a second chance, she was thrilled when a stranger messaged her on Facebook, showing interest in her. Finally, she thought, maybe this was her chance at love again. As they chatted, she found out a shocking detail. He was actually a convict, still serving time, who somehow had access to a phone. Despite her initial shock, she softened, telling herself that everyone deserves a second chance. Ignoring her doubts, she convinced herself that he was worth the risk. After all, she thought, what was love without a little leap of faith? Once he was released, they wasted no time, quickly getting married and moving in together. But as the days went on, small, unsettling signs began to emerge, things that made her uneasy, but nothing that she could put her finger on, until one night, when the house was quiet, a neighbor reported hearing strange sounds, then a scream, and finally, a single gunshot. The police arrived quickly, breaking through the front door and rushing to the bedroom, only to be met with a grim, haunting sight. Her husband, the man she'd taken a chance on, lay there, having ended her life and his own dreams in one tragic final act. This is the case of Kenesha Neely. Before we begin, we would love to extend our deepest condolences to the family as well as friends and well-wishers of Kenesha, who in one way or another were affected by that tragic happening. This case takes us all the way to Hoffman, North Carolina. Hoffman, North Carolina generally has a low crime rate compared to more urban areas, given its small population and rural setting. However, economic hardships over the years have led to fluctuations, particularly with property crime and occasional drug-related offenses. In terms of homicide, Hoffman experiences very low rates, with murder cases being very rare. Kenesha Miranda Harrison Neely was born on March 25, 1986, and lived much of her life in Rockingham, North Carolina. She was known to friends and family as a warm, caring individual who made a strong impression on those around her. She was lucky enough to be born to parents who understood the value of family togetherness and did well to instill it in their children. So, it was no surprise that when Kenesha was lucky enough to give birth to her two daughters, Aaliyah and Jaliyah, she made sure to instill love and togetherness in them. Saying this would make it seem as though Kenesha has a happy home with her kids, but this was not the case. In fact, Kenesha had to raise those kids single-handedly after being abandoned by their father. Kenesha was about to hit the jackpot. Sometime in 2019, Kenesha was on her routine of surfing the Facebook domain when she received a message from a man with the name Sheldon Maurice Neely, aka Moses Chisholmst. He appeared charming, not only in looks but also with his words. In no time, the pair had begun conversing daily and making each other happy. They had also graduated to making FaceTime, and the two were getting well acquainted. At this point, Moses could boast of knowing Kenesha so well, and she on her own end could also boast of the same, or so she thought. You see, Moses told Kenesha every single detail about himself, or should I say, appeared to tell her every little detail about himself. Only, he left out one mysterious detail, which in essence happens to be the most important detail of his life at the time. Moses, who promised Kenesha outings and treats, including playtimes with her and the little girls, was a convict who was charged and sentenced to jail for selling hard substances, abduction, robbery, and use of a firearm in the commission of a felony. So, as they talked, Moses was in jail, and Kenesha did not know for a long period of time, since communication was only through Facebook. The two continued talking and making promises to each other. But as time went on, and being a woman and needy in nature, Kenesha began wondering when the promises they made would be kept, and for what reason were they being held back. These constant questions became trouble to Moses, who had no choice but to cut to the chase. So he decided to tell Kenesha about him being in jail. You're right if you think this was a red flag, but Kenesha had built a strong connection at this point of communication and did not consider the fact that Moses was in jail. Moses was surprised when not only did Kenesha accept him under those circumstances, but she also became an integral part of his prison journey. And what was her excuse? According to her and in her own words, she said, "He told me. I threatened him to do right. He hit me on Facebook like, 'Let me take you out,' knowing fully well he was incarcerated. He took me out on FaceTime, sent me the money and everything. Those dates became our moments." Moses, who could go for months without getting a visitor, began getting visits from Kenesha and her daughters, whom at this point she wanted to get used to their future daddy. The pair began to get overly emotionally attached to each other, with Kenesha being the most attached. This went on for a while until something which doesn't usually happen took place. Kenesha and Moses continued being romantically involved until Moses decided it was time to pop the question and ask her to marry him. Being a convict and one with an uncertain nature, it would be no surprise to find out that this was actually a plot to aid him in parole consideration, considering the advantages of a legal marriage. Initially, Kenesha declined because of his incarceration status, but after much thought and deliberation, she convinced herself it was the right decision and was more than happy to take up his last name. On December 17th, 2021, the pair decided to tie the knot. The attendance wasn't one filled with dignitaries or family members, as in a usual wedding ceremony. In fact, it was more of a few witnesses. But the fact remained, the marriage took place amidst uncertainties and a lot of frowned faces. It could be said that the only ones in attendance were her children, as well as Moses' inmate buddies. Contrary to what Kenesha portrayed on social media, which was that her marriage was a perfect one with her husband fully present, her marriage was actually one filled with phone calls and prison visits, still defeating her initial aim of a father figure in the lives of her children. However, all these weren't enough to deter Kenesha, who constantly expressed her undying feelings for the appointed father of her kids. In fact, on January 17th, 2022, which marked only a month of their wedding anniversary, Kenesha was all over social media where she reassured her newly found husband of her love for him. She even went as far as hiring Shanice, a popular singer, to perform a special cameo for Moses.
She wants you to know that she appreciates you. You're an amazing man, an amazing father. You are her best friend, and she loves everything about you. Loving you, it's easy 'cause you're beautiful. La 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 la, 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 do it do. Bye.
Good news was on the way for Kenesha. Moses was set to be released in September 2022, as long as he behaved well until then. Knowing this news wasn't easy for Kenesha. She decided to book a 5-night stay at an Atlantic City hotel, upgrading all the packages to suit Moses' tastes. Once again, she took to social media to praise him even though she was the one spending all the money. She said, "Happy Father's Day to my kids, father, and my husband. You provide support, protection, and love to them. They know they can depend on their father. They may not be yours biologically, but you have stepped up from day one. We love you, and this is the last Father's Day we would have to spend apart. So I paid for your first trip with me. This, all you've been talking about, rentals and hotel, and yes, I upgraded all the packages for the king that you are." Moses finally got released on September 12th, 2022, 9 months after they tied the knot. The perfect family life Kenesha had envisioned could finally begin, or so she thought. On December 11th, 2022, just 6 days prior to their first-year anniversary, 911 was called to a location where an intoxicated man had just finished assaulting his wife. It was one so serious that if it wasn't, the police wouldn't have been aware in the first place. When the authorities arrived at the scene, they were met with an intoxicated Moses, who just finished battering Kenesha. In fact, it was so bad that Kenesha managed to obtain a firearm to protect herself, in which Moses got shot in the arm. He was then taken to the emergency room, after which he was charged with second-degree kidnapping and an assault. Many would think this was enough of a red flag for Kenesha to distance herself from the already looming danger. However, this was not the case. In fact, Kenesha was responsible for dropping all charges against him and releasing him from jail, pushing the escapade as a minor event between a misunderstanding couple. Kenesha dreamed of becoming a power couple with Moses, and she was determined to make it happen, no matter what it took. But she overlooked that it takes two to make a relationship work, and Moses was someone who had spent a long time in jail. The chances of him being truly loving was slim, but Kenesha was willing to take the risk. For a while, it seemed to pay off, only it didn't last. On February 14th, 2023, which happened to be Valentine's Day, Kenesha announced to the social media world that she and her husband were expecting a baby. It was so much joy and positive expectations from her at first, but all were soon short-lived, and sadly, they lost that baby a few months before the expected delivery month. But, as fate would have it once more, she conceived again. This news seemed to bring the overjoyed couple back together once more. However, their joy was to be short-lived again, but not in the way you're thinking right now. Kenesha was diagnosed with preeclampsia. Preeclampsia is a pregnancy complication marked by high blood pressure and organ damage, often diagnosed after 20 weeks. Symptoms include severe headaches, vision problems, and abdominal pain. If untreated, it can lead to complications such as eclampsia or seizures, preterm birth, and organ failure. The only cure is delivery of the baby. This only meant one thing. Kenesha would have to deliver the baby prematurely in order to save her own life. And thus, it happened. On June 23, 2024, and at exactly 30 weeks of pregnancy, Kamwi Marnavira Neely was born prematurely and required extensive care from the start. Not until July 24th, over a month later, she was able to bring her baby home with hopes of raising her under the love of her siblings and her father, who this time happened to be the biological father. But this was not to be. On the morning of August 4th, 2024, 10 days after Kenesha returned home with her newborn baby, deputies from the Richmond County Sheriff's Office were dispatched to the Neely residence on McCoy Drive in Hoffman in response to a domestic dispute and reports of gunshots heard in the neighborhood. Upon arrival, deputies encountered a locked bedroom door. When they attempted to breach the door, they heard a single gunshot coming from inside the room and rushed to kick in the door. After breaking in the door, deputies found the bodies of Kenesha Neely and Sheldon Maurice Neely inside the room. Both had apparent wounds. Kenesha had been shot multiple times by Moses before he decided to turn it on himself. The scene indicated that Moses had opened fire on Kenesha and then also permanently injured himself by firearm on the head. This incident marked the sad end of a few years of torture, in which Kenesha didn't have to endure, but love happened to be a defining factor for her, and she felt she had to. Upon finding the bodies, the police secured the scene and initiated a thorough investigation. Forensic experts were called in to collect evidence and reconstruct the events, leading to the tragic outcome. The investigation confirmed that it was a self-inflicted violence following homicide. The police had the difficult task of notifying the family and friends of the deceased. This included informing the children's other relatives or guardians about the tragic event, which would be a pivotal moment in the children's lives. Kenesha had to deal with the emotional trauma of raising such inquisitive little kids alone. However, she pulled through and decided to chase a career she loved. Driven by passion to love and to save lives, Kenesha ventured into the healthcare sector. At first, she started as a CNA in various clinics and hospitals, and eventually, seeing how much she excelled at preliminary stages of her medical career, decided to take it a step further by enrolling at the Capella University, where she aimed for a business administration and healthcare degree. Kenesha's life had begun to take shape, and She had even established a career as a licensed bail bondsman. For those who may be confused, a bail bondsman helps people pay bail to stay out of jail while awaiting trial. They cover the bail amount for a fee, usually around 10%. If the person attends court, the bail is returned, but the bondsman keeps the fee. If not, the bondsman may lose the money and sometimes hires a bounty hunter to find the person. At this point, Kenesha could actually say that she had begun living the life, but a part of her was still troubled and yearned for the only missing piece in her life. Kenesha craved the love and touch of a man, not just that she needed a companion, one who her girls could consider a father and would fill the void left by the incompetence of their cowardly biological father. As fate would have it, the news would have been devastating, especially given the sudden and violent nature of the deaths. The 3 children, now orphaned, were immediately taken into care. Social services and child protective agencies were involved to ensure the children's safety and well-being. The children were likely placed with relatives, foster care, or other temporary arrangements until a more permanent solution could be found. The emotional support and counseling for the children would be a critical aspect of their care, given the traumatic nature of their loss. The community in Hoffman, North Carolina was shocked and saddened by the news. Neighbors, friends, and acquaintances of the family found it hard to cope with the tragedy, and many offered support and condolences to the children and their extended family. Local support groups and counseling services were mobilized to help the community cope with the aftermath. Kenesha's funeral was slated for August 13, 2024. This was a confirmation of the permanence of her exit. As sad as this may seem, Kenesha's love blinded her into thinking she could change a convict whose only language happened to be violence. While some may be quick to point fingers, we should be sure to bring this to a practical ground. Most of us still find ourselves in situations, friendships, and relationships that beg our exits. But for one reason or the other, we tend to hold on to the last strand of hope. It is always easier said than done, but with struggle and determination, you could fight your way out of any violent friendship or relationship into a more deserving one. Do you blame Kenesha for letting love lead her? Or do you think she did it for her children in order for them to have the privilege of being raised by a dad? Or was it just her craving companionship? Your answers to these questions and any other additional comments would be welcomed in the comment section. Once again, thank you for listening to Wednesday True Crime Channel. Do well to like our videos and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already done that. Until next time, it's bye for now.